Welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU 2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
Quick now, what is NACUSO? Of course, that's the National Association of Credit Union Service Organizations. And CUSOs just may be the credit union's secret power. On the show today is Seth Brickman, former CEO of QCash and now president of Ranqx, a powerful tool that can gather the necessary financial information from a would-be borrower, analyze and issue a verdict on a business loan application in a matter of minutes. A credit union typically would take a couple weeks to get to that verdict, which, by the way, is no in 2 out of 3 cases, says Brickman. Brickman is a credit union true believer, and he especially believes that credit unions have the pole position in lending to small businesses in their community, if they also have the right tools and process automation. That's where Ranqx comes in, of course. On the show, Brickman tells how Ranqx works, and it's already working at credit unions, including MSU Federal Credit Union and also at CUSOs. Which brings us back to the discussion that opens the show. Does NACUSO matter? Brickman has a passionate answer, and spoiler alert, probably you can guess it. Listen up. Do we still need NACUSO?
Yeah, so do we still need NACUSO? The answer is a resounding yes, Robert. And, the reason we need NACUSO is, well, there's several reasons, but number one is with the merger that has become America's credit unions, we lost one of our major advocacy voices for the credit union space. And so right now, there's really 2 main advocacy voices for the credit union space. It's NACUSO and it's America's credit unions. And while we agree a lot, we don't agree 100% of the time. And so
I would add a third voice that's gotten loud recently, and that's DCUC.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
Hernandez has gotten a big soapbox.
Yeah, and Tony's a great guy.
I like the guy. But man, he's really gotten big muscles now.
Yeah, and I actually think it's even better for our industry to have a third voice like that, right? Because there's going to be a focus. His focus is going to be a lot different than what NACUSO's is. And I think it's better for us as we speak to our regulators, and especially the NCUA, that they hear different perspectives, right? And so you don't want there to just be one voice. You want there to be multiple voices on these different things that are occurring so that we get the right decisions coming out of Washington. But more importantly than that, and this is something that DCUC doesn't do, something that America's Credit Union doesn't do, it's the idea that there is a place for credit unions and for fintechs to come together and understand how they can partner better to make our industry stronger. When I look at, for example, I'm in lending, and the latest statistics to come out of the FDIC are that 70% of all big banks and 50% of all banks are using fintechs to assist them with lending. And credit unions, and the only thing they say that they compete with credit unions on is interest rate, certainly not on member experience. And I think credit unions need to embrace fintechs in their lending space to create an equivalent member experience. And so there's got to be somebody that's saying, here's the right fintechs, here's the good fintechs, here's CUSOs that are driving major change in the industry, and then here's the credit unions that are innovative and forward-thinking and are trying to make things better and are willing to be early adopters of technology to prove out the technology. And NACUSO brings those groups together in a way that nobody else does. And so, I think whether it's on the advocacy side, the credit union side, or the fintech CUSO side, NACUSO covers those 3 grounds extremely well. And without NACUSO, there would be a vacuum in that space. And I think our industry would suffer for it.
Well, I've come to believe that the real secret weapon for credit unions is the CUSO. That it's
Absolutely.
vastly more important to the sector than the tax exemption is, for instance. That's my opinion. It's
Yeah, look, there was just so I'm part of the filing think tank, and somebody on the filing think tank did a study on what would happen if credit unions got taxed. And so we're waiting to hear that study, but it doesn't sound like it's super impactful.
another thing kicking around Washington D.C. that I'm sure you've heard is that NCUA is almost certainly going to have staff reductions. I mean, that's a definite. NCUA may lose its independence too. That's unknown. But that's apparently something that's on the table in Washington, D.C. at this point, right? Which is to say it'll become part of an amalgamated agency with several other regulators. It'll be a desk in a building. So who's going to be there doing the CUSO thing right? Maybe that's NACUSO.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. I am a big fan of Kyle Hopman, and I'm super excited. He is the chairman of the NCUA right now. And, I trust that he's going to make sure he does the right things for credit unions. But you're right. Even in the situation we're in with a fully functioning NCUA, the reality is there is a need for a trade organization like NACUSO to not only provide input, but be that industry spokesperson of what's happening in the technology arena that's impacting credit unions so that credit unions can thrive and effectively compete against banks.
You might have noticed it didn't get a lot of attention, but Navy Federal has now become a part of the Circle Fund. In other words, it's put money into this. And that when the biggest dog in the field says, okay, fine, we'll join in this. That's really interesting. So they're saying we could benefit from this CUSO world too, which
Yeah,
is
look,
essentially what Circle Fund is about, is CUSOs. So
yeah, look, I think that for the longest time, whether it's Navy Federal or whether it's state employees at the Carolinas, they have been very what I would call Microsoft-esque in the sense that, if they didn't build it, they weren't going to use it type scenario. And I think what they're seeing now is, even Navy Federal, which is the largest of all credit unions, Chase's R&D budget or IT budget is still greater than the entire budget for Navy Federal, right? And I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe
I think Chase's coffee budget is bigger than Navy Federal's budget.
And so how does a Navy Federal compete, right? With a big bank? Well, you're going to do it by making sure you have the right fintech supporting your member base and giving them better experiences than even the bank has, because the credit union space is the only space that can bring together relationship and technology, right? The banks are really good at bringing technology to their customers, but the reason we view them as members and not customers is because we're bringing a relational aspect where they feel valued and seen and cared for, that a bank's never going to do. And so, Navy, I'm a member of Navy Federal. I've been a member of Navy Federal for 26 years now. And it's important to me because, I think what they do for the military is incredible. And knowing that now they're embracing more technology outside of their internal sources makes me even more excited for their future.
Where in your life did you join Navy Federal?
It was when I was in the Navy.
Yeah, I understand that, but when in the course of that career?
It was very early in my career because, they just made getting our access to paychecks and things like that easier. Plus, as a junior military person, I lived on base and it was easy to get access to a Navy Federal.
Well, I asked because I heard this story years ago. A guy went on to a pretty good career in the credit union. Told me this. He was at Annapolis as whatever they call the first year people.
at Annapolis.
Please, yeah.
A plebe. And so an upperclassman showing him around. And on this tour, upperclassman takes him to Navy Federal and a branch like, you're going to want to open up an account there. And he walks him in. I mean, it's this salesmanship. And the guy wasn't getting a commission or anything. He really believed in Navy Federal. So that guy had been in Navy Federal since he was 18, I guess. So let's switch gears. You're now in the business lending world, which I've been hearing about credit unions for several years now, 3-5 years, something like that. Oh, we're going to start doing a lot of business lending. And I check back with them and I ask them how it's going. And they said, well, and they changed the topic to what the weather is.
Yep.
So why is this the case? Why credit unions said, oh, this is a great opportunity for us. And then in a few years, they say, they're not saying it, but it's implied that it hasn't worked out too well. Why?
Yeah. So here's my favorite analogy, Robert, and that is a credit union will give a $100,000 indirect truck loan to somebody they have never met before, sitting at a car dealership, completely digital in under 5 minutes. That same exact person needs a $25,000 working capital for their business in which they just got that truck for. And the credit union goes, I need 2 years of P&L. I need balance sheets. I need your tax returns. I need your leases. I need every contract. I need your business plan. And what they've done is they have not advanced the technology side of business lending to where the process is extremely manual. And that's really why Ranqx exists. So the credit unions that we're working with and the credit unions that we talk to, the average time from application to loan decision is 1 to 2 weeks. So if you're a small business and you need money to buy inventory because you just got a large order and you need to wait 2 weeks, and then, oh, by the way, the NCUA data says that credit unions decline 70% of the loan requests. You're waiting 2 weeks to only get declined for something you really need to fulfill an order and make a ton of money, right? It's just a bad experience for the business. And then it's a ton of manual work for the credit union. And so Ranqx fixes that because we've digitized that entire process. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But the other big thing that credit unions didn't think about is they used what I would call the field of dreams methodology, meaning if you build it, they'll come. And so some of them introduced small business lending, even though it's manual and it's clunky, but they didn't tell anybody about it. And so current NCUA data says that credit unions are only getting 8% of the small business lending opportunities that are even out there. So 92% are going to banks or alternative lenders, and 8% are going to credit unions. And so they're not even getting the opportunities because they're not letting people know that they have this great service, i.e. small business lending. And then it's completely manual. So they started these programs. They didn't let anybody know. They didn't get a lot of traction, and they weren't getting enough loans when you look at the amount of effort that they were putting into it to make the programs make sense. Again, Ranqx recognized that issue. And so not only do credit union businesses go from application to recommended decision in 5 minutes instead of 2 weeks, but we actually are partnering with an agency to build out a hyper-localized marketing program to help credit unions inform their small businesses in their field of membership that they now have a frictionless and seamless solution for small business lending. So it's a game changer. And that's why I'm in this space. You know, we had incredible success bringing QCash to the masses, 600% growth in 3 years. And I want to do the same thing that I did on the consumer lending side, now on the small business lending side, and help credit union members get the experience they've always wanted.
Now, I was a partner in a small business some years ago. And I remember one Wednesday, payday was Friday. My partner and I realized that we weren't going to be able to make payroll on Friday. So we said, the light bulb clicked. We downstairs, there was our bank, which was a branch of what now you'd call a money center bank. Said, okay, fine. We've had an account there for a while. Let's go down and see if we can get a loan. We went down. A bank manager actually talked with us. She was very polite and very politely basically told us to shuffle off. Now we did make payroll. We managed to batter some money out of one of our deadbeat clients. We didn't actually go Sopranos, but we did get the money. So now that was a big bank. That was not a community bank. I think community banks have a different approach to small business lending. It's one thing they do well, and I think they're still doing it at the local country club. That's where they're hunting for prospects, and prospects are hunting for loans. Is at the country club.
Robert, FDIC and NCUA data says that 52% of small businesses are actually using alternative lenders like On Deck, Cabbage, Intuit, who owns QuickBooks, has
and that is I've talked to people in that business. That's basically cash flow analysis, period.
Yep.
I talked to a guy who does a lot of loans, mainly smallish loans, say under 100,000 usually. And he can give you a decision in 5 minutes. All he needs is 1 year, 2 years preferably, of your checking account. That's it. That's all he wants to see.
It's also at predatory interest rates. It's 30, 40, 60%.
He didn't tell me exactly what he was charging, but he told me it was a bit higher than normal.
Well, I went on to OnDeck's website the end of January because I was preparing for a speech I was writing. And in their website, when it shows you the example of how they calculate your interest rate, they were showing an over 60% interest rate.
Oh my heavens. That's almost back to the old loan sharking days.
Yeah, exactly. But when you're a small business and you need that money, where are you going to turn if you're
if you need that money to make your payroll on Friday and it's Wednesday, you're freaking out. It's
exactly.
So 60%, you don't even care anymore. You're not in a reality thinking mode. You're just in a I gotta get it mode.
Yep. And that's why Ranqx is so effective, because we can give that small business a decision in 5 minutes versus 1 to 2 weeks.
Now, when you tell a credit union executive exactly what you told me, do they say, I gave up thinking about the tooth fairy when I was 5?
Well, a lot of the times what they'll tell me is, we've done small business lending in the past and it didn't, we weren't getting enough volume to make it make sense. And that's when I talk about our marketing solution. Or they'll tell me that it's too manual and the amount of effort that their staff had to put into it, took them away from higher value loans that they could make more money on. And again, Ranqx by automating everything from, and I guess let me start with this, Robert. There's two unique things about Ranqx. Number one, we've digitized the whole process, meaning the small business does not upload 2 years of P&L and balance sheet. The Ranqx platform actually connects directly into their accounting system and builds that. And then we use API calls and we pull in their tax returns. That's what allows us to calculate all of those ratios and come up with those metrics and KPIs in under 5 minutes. It's because we've truly digitized the whole process. So we've taken all that work off the small business and we've taken all that work off of the loan officer. But what we like to say is a fast no is way better than a slow maybe. And so like your position, you're on a Wednesday and you needed money by Friday. And if a credit union's taking 1 to 2 weeks to process your application, that doesn't help you at all.
No, you've already moved on to other options, even if even the credit union is still diligently working on its decision making. So their effort is essentially wasted, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah. So credit union CEOs are looking at it going, where were you, 5 years ago? And then, they're again, we've got a lot of good traction right now with Ranqx. We've got some strong investors. Every credit union that we talk to gets excited about the capabilities. Now, look, at the end of the day, there's still NCUA caps for some credit unions on how much small business lending they can do, and that's okay. We know how to work within those caps.
And what are the caps?
I think it's 12.5%, but it's an NCUA cap.
How often is that really an obstacle to credit unions? Because I think most of them basically have $0 in that that category.
Yeah, right now it's not an obstacle at all. If you go back to that statistic I told you earlier about the credit unions are only getting 8% of the loan opportunities. When you look at a bank, their loan opportunities are pretty much split 50-50 commercial real estate to non-commercial real estate, or what we call working capital. When you look at a credit union, it's actually 93% commercial real estate, 7% working capital. So not only are they only getting 8% of the opportunities, only 7% of them are working capital loans. So they're really not in that business right now. And that's the business they need to be in, because when small businesses thrive, communities thrive. And there's so much data to support that. And the reality is when communities thrive, credit unions thrive. And so it's a win-win for a credit union to be in this space.
I don't think anybody would disagree with the thesis that the reason small town middle America is literally evaporating in front of us is because there's no money coming into small town middle America. Yeah. And things like the local bank is closing. This guy told me when the local bank closes and the gas station closes, the town is dead. And there's some truth to that. And
for sure.
Can you help a credit union market small business loans? In other words, it's great. You give me this technology. Oh, cool. I got the coolest technology going. But if no one's coming knocking on my door, what good is it?
Absolutely. And that's where I was kind of sharing, we now are working with an agency, and we have the capability to build out a hyper-localized marketing program to target the small businesses in the credit union's field of membership, so that we can create awareness to that small business that this credit union now has not just small business lending, but seamless, frictionless, very quick decision small business lending. And that's what they're all looking for. But more importantly, they're looking for that relationship because they can't find it, and they're certainly not going to get it from an alternative lender. Right. And so what we like to say, and one of the things that, for example, Michigan State University Federal Credit Union, who's one of our clients, what they're going to do is they're going to require everybody who gets a small business loan from them to move the depository relationship over to them. So what that does is that gives them organic deposit growth, which helps their asset growth. But even more importantly, not only did they just grow from doing business lending by now doing business banking, but by having that business as part of the credit union, they now have access to those businesses' employees, and they can grow their consumer side as well. Right. So it really is a huge win for the credit union to do business lending and get those businesses on board, because it's hard to grow your consumer side. But when you are already servicing that business, it's a whole lot easier to get those employees.
Well, Michigan State is also an investor in Nook.
Yeah.
And one of the things Nook offers is deals and discounts to the credit union members. Now, one way to get a business to offer deals and discounts as your members is to be their financial institution. So
That's
if
right.
they move their financial, okay, you got a tighter relationship. So now if I ask you to give me like $1 off on hamburgers on Thursday, you'll say, okay.
Yep.
So, whereas if I asked you before I was banking there, I wouldn't even know who you were. So
exactly.
Now, who besides Michigan State is a customer?
So we've got Washington State Employees Credit Union.
How'd you get them? They're I hear they're a little aloof.
Well, they're one of my favorites. Needless to say, I have a very strong relationship with that credit union from the CUSO that they owned that I ran, where we had a very successful exit. So thankfully, they believed in me enough to invest in me on a second opportunity. So very appreciative of the forward-thinking leadership there. But honestly, the core reason they invested is because when you walk out of their corporate headquarters and you look up and down the street where they're at, there's nothing but small businesses there. And Washington State Employees Credit Union has a heart for small businesses, and they want to see them thrive, and they want to give them a good experience. And Ranqx does that for them. But we've even got, just to kind of give you both ends of the spectrum, we have People's Advantage Federal Credit Union, which is a $98 million asset credit union in Northern Virginia. And not only are they under contract with us, but they're an investor in us. And we're their first CUSO investment they've ever made. And what's cool about them, Amanda Habansky is their CEO, and she is one of the most innovative, forward-thinking CEOs I've ever met. She's amazing. They actually do extremely early stage small business lending. So their businesses, I told you we connect directly into accounting software. Their businesses aren't even using accounting software yet, Robert. They're actually using Venmo and Cash App to run their businesses. And so as part of them having a seat on our product advisory panel, we've been scoping out the ability to bring in Venmo and Cash App transactions specifically for them so that we can figure out how to build out some sort of financial statement that's going to support their lending activities. And so that's one of the great things about investing in Ranqx as well, is you get that seat on our product advisory panel, and you can truly shape the way credit unions do small business lending. And so we do have the large credit unions, just like Michigan State University and like Washington State. We have small credit unions like People's Advantage. And then we also partner with CUSOs as well. So we're partnered and we're live with Michigan Business Connection, which is a business lending CUSO for 26 credit unions. And so, we just are invested completely into the credit union space, making sure that all credit unions have the ability to provide the best business lending experience, as well as partnering with CUSOs who are nothing but focused on business lending and helping businesses thrive.
So what's the nature of that partnership with the CUSO that's focused on business lending?
So we're basically their front door. So, they've been doing it for a long time manually, and then they also service the loans and things like that. But imagine your loan officer at your credit union, or in example, this CUSO, instead of having to take an uploaded document like a P&L, manually transfer numbers from a P&L into an Excel spreadsheet, from a tax return into an Excel spreadsheet, calculate all of these different ratios, manually compare it to underwriting criteria. Imagine that person now, all they have to do is review all of that documentation that's sitting on their computer and everything's calculated for them, including a recommended decision based on their underwriting criteria. So by partnering with Ranqx, we are literally removing 75 to 80% of the manual work that they had to do to process that loan.
So when you're talking with a credit union, why do they tell you no?
So for some of them, it's, there's a belief that you can't do business lending without doing business banking because you're building a relationship with the business. And if you don't have other services to offer them, then you feel like you're not doing them the justification of that. And so we hear that sometimes where it's like, hey, look, we really want to do small business lending, but we don't even offer business banking. And so is there really a value to the business by getting a loan from us? Or are we just a money store, right? So I understand that a little bit. I actually think that's a great front door to start building those relationships with businesses, because one day you're going to get into business banking, and now you already have these business relationships, and you're most likely going to grow that very quickly.
Well, Seth, go back. You were mentioning indirect auto loans a while ago.
Yeah.
Just think how poorly most credit unions have done with indirect auto loans, because the promise of the indirect auto loan, i.e., that this would become a member with a working functional share draft account, a savings account, a credit card, et cetera, that promise is illusory. That very rarely happens, which is why credit unions say, oh, indirect auto loans suck. There's nothing wrong with them. There's something wrong with the marketing that you've done to those customers, to those members.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're right.
And when I give that little speech, no one likes to hear it.
So, that's really the main reason. Or, the other thing we hear a lot is we're already completely lent out and we don't even have the capacity to do a new type of lending.
Now, that might be true. And that's harder to say, oh, boo-hoo, it's not. Yeah. Okay. Now, that's a legitimate problem. If a credit union says, okay, this is a go, how long do you take to be operational for that credit union?
Yeah, so the beauty of our platform today is that we create all of the payload that the credit union needs to underwrite and originate that loan, and then we deliver it directly into either their current LOS or their digital banking solution. And so our integrations are about 12 to 16 weeks. And it's not a highly technical integration because we're just delivering you the payload. And then you as the credit union are going to push it through to your core through a system that's already connected to the core. Now, as you know, my background from my previous CUSO, I built deep connections into 9 different cores to allow credit unions to do completely hands-off lending. And we are going to add that capability to Ranqx so that credit unions can process credit cards or lines of credit completely hands-off, right? Or even a smaller term loan with excellent credentialing that they can do hands-off and not even need a loan officer to look at it. But for right now, what we recognize is credit unions have systems that work really well for them, and we want to work within those systems that are already working.
And your range, your size range is very unusual. You'll go from teeny to multi-billion.
And that's purposeful because, at the end of the day, like I said, People's Advantage Federal Credit Union, they're lending to these small businesses that are using Venmo and Cash App to run their business. They're tiny. And then, but they still need the service, and People's Advantage wants to serve their membership and their community, right? And so I give them kudos for being willing to step out of the box and do that kind of work. That's hard work. And then you've got incredible credit unions like People's Advantage, like Michigan State University Federal Credit Union, that literally launched an entirely new brand for business banking called Pillar. And so their vision was, we're already a great credit union. Let's make that experience even better for our businesses by giving them their own business banking experience through a new brand under the MSU header. And so they launched Pillar, and Pillar is designed to give businesses the relational experience that they desire and they're looking for. And so again, you got both ends of the spectrum, but both of them come back to the exact same root and initiative, which is how do we make our membership feel cared for and build those relationships on the business side?
Now let's jump to why you're running for the NACUSO board.
So look, I've been on the board now for 3 years. So I just completed my first term. And in those 3 years, I served on just about every committee, including the ones people don't want to serve on, like the governance committee, right? Those are hard work. But at the end of the day, what it does is it sets the organization up for success. And I have seen personally the impact that NACUSO makes in our industry. It's important for fintechs and CUSOs to know that there's somebody advocating for them, but also that there is subject matter experts that can help them walk the maze that is trying to get into the credit union industry. And then from the credit union perspective, look, there's a lot of technology companies out there, and not all of them are good for you. Not all of them understand your tech stack. Not all of them know what works with what core or what digital banking. And so for credit unions, the ability to have a centralized trade organization that understands their space, that understands their tech stacks, and that can bring together fintechs and CUSOs to the people that want to use them, it's invaluable. And so I think that we are at the precipice of really making a massive difference in our communities and in our industry. And then, like we talked about, that advocacy voice, we actually listen to fintechs and CUSOs and credit unions and are advocating for both groups on their behalf. And we're probably the only organization that is actually listening to that both sides. And I think it's important. I think it's important that we have a voice. And so for me, being on the board has been incredibly fulfilling and rewarding. It's been a lot of hard work, but I think the work's not done. And so the ability to continue to be a part of this incredible organization and continue to lead it from the board perspective and help the staff drive the impact that NACUSO is having to be that credit union industry leader and thought leader. Again, super important. So yeah, I want to continue that work because I believe in the mission of NACUSO, but more importantly, I believe in the credit union industry.
Before we go, think hard. about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Robert McGarvey again. That's rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU 2.0 podcast.